Hello and welcome to another episode of Practical IT. In this episode, we're going to look at Zorin OS 12.4. Let's get the installation started and then we'll move and take a look at their website. Alright, we can go ahead and click the start button since I've got everything set up in VirtualBox and ready to go. And once we get the installer kicked off, we'll move over to the website and take a look. This is based on Ubuntu, so it should be very familiar for people that are using the terminal. What is going to set this apart in large part is the surface level stuff, the graphical interface, the ability to sort of switch from a Windows-esque look to a Mac type look, and just some of the polish that they've put on this. I've not used Zorin OS in a number of years. The last time I used it, I was refurbishing a computer for a friend, and they did not have money for a Windows license. And so we put Zorin on the machine at that time, but that's been 2 or 3 major versions ago, and it's just time to take another look at it and see whether I would still recommend it for situations like that. So let's go ahead, switch to scaled mode. Alright, that looks better. Install, and we'll do third-party software and updates. Continue. We've got nothing on the disk, so yes, it can erase. Continue again. New York is correct. Okay, this is where we need more screen real estate. So, okay. Well, let's see, there we go. Alright, so the installer is doing its thing, copying files. Let's take a look at the website. There we go. Okay, so Zorin is kind of interesting. So you can see in this screenshot here, it's got sort of a Windows-esque look. But claims desktop as versatile as it's easy to use. So there we go, sort of a Mac look, and then your more traditional Linux GNOME look. So rock solid and reliable, safe from viruses, apps and games, compatible, flexible, accessible. And so jump back to the top. If we go to the download tab here, they give you a couple of options. And so they've got an ultimate version, which is a paid version, unfortunately. 19 euros. And frankly, I'm not inclined to pay for a Linux distribution, especially one that is an offshoot of Ubuntu, which I tend to use Ubuntu quite extensively, and I know from experience with Mint and others that you don't always get everything that runs on Ubuntu to run on Ubuntu derivatives. There's a business version and then the core version, which is what we are installing today. And you can set the donation for core to 0, which is what I did. And then they've got a light version for old low-spec computers and education spin. Just for giggles, let's take a look at Zorin OS Lite. Quick and cohesive experience, even on computers as old as 14 years. So, there we go. Let's see how our installer is doing. Still copying files. Alright, so To look at the about, Zorin was started in 2008, so it's been around for about 11 years, depending on what part of 2008 it started in. It gives a little bit of history, talks about funding and donating, contact, press kit for their logos and screenshots. Other things that might be kind of interesting to get my hands on. So, system requirements. Pretty light system requirements. 1 gigahertz single core computer, or excuse me, 1 gigahertz single core CPU, gig and a half of RAM, 10 gig storage, and 800 by 600 resolution. So yes, everything built in the last 12, probably longer, years will run this without much issue. We look over here. So the Core 2 Solo processor was introduced in September 2007. So the Core 2 Duo, what are we looking at? About 2008 or 9 for the release date. Oh, Core 2 brand was introduced on July 27th, 2006. So, yeah, literally, we're talking almost 13 years ago, and you can definitely run Zorin on older machines than this because they do support the single core and speed as low as 700 megahertz. So, yeah, this could be handy to have around. Look at the download one more time. And come back to the core. And they actually do still have a 32-bit version. So I recently resurrected a gateway machine from, I believe, 2002. Has 768 megs of RAM, a 1.4 gigahertz Athlon processor, one of the early Athlon processors. And so, you know, this would be a possibility to go on that machine. Currently, that machine is running a straight 32-bit version of Debian, which runs actually quite well on that machine, surprisingly. But if I wanted to put a graphical interface on that, this would be an option. Alright, let's go back to the install and see where we're at. Still installing system. So at this point, I'm going to step away for a few moments, and I will come back when we are finishing up the install process. Alrighty, we have finally reached the end of our installation, and we'll go ahead and get restarted. Login screen. Okay, so it defaults to our sort of Windows-esque look. First thing I want to do, right? Let's look for their settings. Alright, so displays. And we want to change our resolution. We'll do 1440 by 900. And interestingly enough, it does not scale up our background image. Actually, let's try one other thing here. Take it out scale mode. And still, alright, let's try our background image and see what we can do with this. Changing the background image does help. We've got our different categories, kind of a Windows XP-ish, Windows 7-ish menu. And you click on the category and it gives you sub items. Of course, it includes Mahjong and Solitaire. Internet, we got Chromium, Zorin web browser, Geary, and Empathy. So it has a smattering of things installed. Office does have LibreOffice, and it is version 5, which is an older version. They're on version 6.1 point something at this point. Not horrible, but not impressive either, in my estimation. Zorin appearance. This is one of the things that really kind of sets it apart. So I don't like icons on the desktop. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Title bar buttons, it lets you mimic the Mac kind of thing by moving the buttons to the left. We can change our location of the icon bar, left side, or we can do bottom, the theme, the panel, and then on the bottom, show desktop button is off, and we'll just stick with that for right now. Alright. Like testing out and seeing if it detects my printer when I use a new distribution. A lot of distributions are detecting things by default, and this is one of them. And it's going to install my Brother HL5370 DW, and that's the only printer, so it's going to be the default. So that's good. Let's go into System Tools, and we'll just launch a terminal here, bigger, and using a 4.15 kernel. And using about 2 gigs of RAM of the 4 gigs allocated. Running GNOME shell, and there's updates available. So we'll start that installing and just let it go. Nope. Normally I choose to do this from the command line just because I spend a lot of time on the command line. So let's see what we have for our file manager. And we got our icon display. Change it to a list display. Let's choose columns. Not bad, pretty standard stuff. And this is GNOME files. Load up Chromium and see what we're dealing with here. Open a customized start page, which is alright. About Chromium, version 73, not bad. Geary, I believe, is an email client. Everything else is pretty standard fare. It's got Google Maps loaded. For games, it's got Solitaire, Mahjong Mines, which is a Minesweeper clone, a Tetris clone, and a Sudoku game. Graphics, LibreOffice Draw, GIMP, and Simple Scan. Office, which we looked at before. Sound and video, Bracero for burning discs, Cheese for webcam, taking pictures from the webcam, PTV, which is a video editor. Interesting choice. So look at that. I have not played with this particular Linux video editor. Pretty basic looking video editor. If you're coming from iMovie, this shouldn't be difficult to get started with. Not terribly full-featured from what I can tell, but if you're doing really basic stuff, it may be useful to you. I'm actually gearing up to experiment with switching my workflow from iMovie on my Mac to a different video editor. I've been testing a couple, and I should have more information about that possible switch coming up in a future video. My thoughts on Zorin OS. Some interesting choices have been made. It seems to be fairly smooth running for the most part. There are a few places where it feels like it's lagging a little bit, and this is with my standard VM configuration. 4 gigs of RAM, 128 megs for video, and I put a 10 gigabyte virtual hard drive on this. Since I am running updates and they're not going to be done before this video ends, I have not installed guest editions, which may streamline some things since I'm running a VirtualBox. For the most part, if this is somebody's first look at Linux, I think this is a nice way to get started. Still has some Windows-like properties, so people coming from a Windows background won't feel completely out of their element. Being based on Ubuntu, you're going to find a good amount of software and fairly easy ways to get support if you run into issues. If I find anything really interesting about this or really different, I will make a follow-up video and we'll discuss those things in a little more detail. Before we go, if you've not done so, please take a moment to subscribe, click the thumbs up icon and the bell to get updates for future videos. Until next time, thank you for watching. Have a great day.